So what are the best budget PC cases under $100 in 2022? In today's video, we're gonna look at my top 3 favorite PC cases below $100 based on both my own impressions, user reviews and other experts, helping you figure out which $100 budget chassis to choose for your next budget PC build in 2022. And with that said, let's jump right into the video. Now, when it comes to picking a case, there are various things to consider. What about size, airflow and thermals? Are those things important to you? And what about features, fan control and RGB? Now, to make things a bit easier for each PC case recommendation, I will be leaving my pros and cons to give you guys a better idea whether the case fits your needs or not. Also, you want to stick around all the way till the end of the video where I will leave my personal favorite and my own case recommendation. Let's take a look at my first chassis on the list. This, my friends, is the Lancool 2 and it comes from Lian. And I have to tell you guys, strap in because you're about to get blown away. With an MSRP on $99, Lian has proven that it is actually possible to build a premium-like chassis for cheap. With the Lancool 2, you find features that are standard in more expensive products, such as a PSU shroud cover, RGB and fan hub, options to mount the GPU vertically, 3 included 120mm fans, as well as 2 magnetically secured flip panels and 2 tempered glass side doors on hinges. The Lancool 2 supports up to ATX enclosures, but because the chassis is pretty spacious, you won't have any problems fitting even longer GPUs. Open up the flip panels and we find a tool-free sliding drive cage that you can transform into a hot swappable solution if you add the optional HDD mount. On the other side of the case, we find cable covers to easily get rid of all the cables and to give the case a clean look with only 2 SSDs to display. And overall, the cooling support is excellent with plenty of air ventilation throughout the case. The front has 2 large ventilated stripes, allowing the included 120 fan maximum air intake. The front is fitted with a removable radiator bracket, allowing for fast and easy radiator installation. At the top we find a removable dust filter and support for a 240 radiator. As for ports, we find 2 USB 3 and there is a Type-C here as well, although that requires an optional $10 cable. Now, all I can say that throughout my years of building PCs, I have yet to stumble across a case with this many features sub $100. So let's look at the good stuff. First up, great cooling right out of the box. We also got support for longer graphics cards. In terms of pricing, it beats pretty much all cases in its price class, and there's lots of expandability here. On the not so good stuff, other than low availability in some regions, there is actually not a whole lot to talk about here. What I can say is that after being using the case for a handful of builds, I do actually recommend adding another fan for optimal cooling. Let's move on to spot number 2. Here we find the Phanteks P400A or the P360A, depending on space and needs. Both supports the ATX standard, but the P400A is a tad bit taller and allow for an additional fan at the front. Now with the P series, Phanteks is focusing on airflow, where the whole front is in full mesh. Now, thanks to the way that the mesh front is created, it actually double acts as a dust filter to allow for maximum air intake. The P360 comes with 2 RGB fans and the P400 comes with 3. Phanteks is selling 2 variants where the A at the end includes RGB lighting, an RGB button at the front, as well as an RGB fan controller. Now, despite which one you get, you can house a high-end system here and expect excellent thermals right out of the box. Now for ports, we find 2 USB 3 ports, a headphone and microphone throughput, as well as a large illuminated power button on top. We also find an RGB and a fan controlled button. Looking at the pros and cons, on the plus side we find excellent airflow performance, support for long GPUs, we find an RGB controller, and a double acting mesh front and dust filter allows for easy cleaning. Now on the not so good stuff, we find no vertical GPU mount support, Lastly, although you can install two 120 fans in the roof, because there aren't any offset mounting points, a radiator is not an option as it would conflict with the motherboard and memory. But other than that, a brilliant chassis I cannot recommend enough. Moving on to spot 3 on the list, here we find the H510 from NZXT. This is a mid-size enclosure with support for all kinds of configurations. Although with a few exceptions that we're gonna talk about in just a second. NZXT is going for a sleek, minimalistic approach, and if that is what you're after, you won't be disappointed here. The case comes in a wide range of colors, all with a sort of a matte, grainy finish that looks great. Inside we find a well-designed interior with enough space to fit even slightly longer GPUs. Looking at the rear of the case, we find two included 120 fans mounted in the rear, and we find another one in the roof. There is also room to fit another two in the front, and there is a removable bracket for fans if you want to change the airflow configuration or mount a radiator. In terms of airflow, we find a relatively small amount of ventilations at the front, the top where the fan is mounted, as well as in the rear. Now NZXT is selling two variants of the H510, opting for the I variant, and you get a couple of extra features such as the CAM software powered smart device, which utilizes machine learning to find the perfect point between noise and performance for fans. You also get two LED strips and two additional fans. NZXT has also thought about keeping things nice and tidy and have designed excellent cable routing, which uses built-in cable channels at the back to keep everything nice and clean. Looking at the front, we find a power button, a USB 3.1 Type A, as well as USB 3.1 Type C, as well as a headphone audio jack. Now looking at the pros and cons, on the plus side we do find a relatively small footprint here, which makes the case ideal if you have a smaller room with limited space. The quality control is also great here. I like the fact that you get the CAM software, as it gives you a lot more options in terms of fan speed and RGB control. The chassis is also very easy to build in, but on the not so good stuff we find pretty disappointing airflow, and let's be real here guys, a case with a sealed front won't have the best airflow. And while the H510 is pretty versatile and can fit quite large CPU coolers and medium length GPUs, I wouldn't recommend this case for high-end kits, as thermal will be an issue. Now for a more budget PC build, I think the H510 is a good solid case with good enough cooling. However, as you move up to more powerful GPUs, thermals will become an issue. Now thankfully NZXT now has a model focusing on airflow called Flow, where the solid front has been switched out to a ventilated mesh front. If you plan to build a gaming PC in a slightly smaller form factor, I would highly recommend having a look at the MB320 or the MB311 from Cooler Master. If you're interested, I have a video linked up down below that covers the case in greater depth. Now if I were to build a slightly smaller PC, this would be the case I would pick, and if I were to build in a bigger system, I would either opt for the Lancool 2 or the P400A. Both options offers great airflow, where the Lancool 2 actually being my top recommendation. Either way, both options offers great airflow, stellar quality and performance, all under $100. Have any questions or suggestions? Leave them down below. I will be back with a brand new video in just a few days.